Well, welcome everyone to the Center for Strategic International Studies. My name is Rick Ozzie Nelson. I'm Director of the Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Program at CSIS. Today we have a half-day conference, we'd like to call it, on aviation screening and the security in the 21st century. This is an event we wanted to have with our sponsor, U.S. Travel, on the 10th anniversary of the ATSA, of the Aviation Transportation Security Act. And we're fortunate to have some of the preeminent experts in the fields of aviation security, including some senior level executives from TSA, including Gail Rosides, who we're going to hear from first. CSIS is a nonprofit, nonpartisan institution, and so these events, we really need sponsorship, and we're fortunate today to have this event sponsored by U.S. Travel Association, and I wanted to thank them for partnering us. It's important for us to have a forum where we can have a discussion about these very sensitive but very critical issues as well. Obviously, there are very few issues out there as sensitive in many ways that TSA's policies have been in the last 10 years as they've evolved. We can see that with Congressman Micah's comments, but also in that Julie Bykowitz from Bloomberg has a report coming out tomorrow that's going to talk about the fact that complaints against TSA are the lowest they've been since 2004. So already into the history of TSA, we have two very still distinct viewpoints on the organization. So going forward today, we want to have a substantive conversation and see what the future is for aviation security, and talk about what some of the challenges are and how we're going to continue to evolve this system that's so important to the security of the United States. And with that, we'll go ahead and start off with Gail Rosides. I think most of you know Gail. She's been Deputy Director of TSA. She's one of the 6 original federal executives to help handpicked in 2002 to actually stand up TSA. So when we talk about the anniversary of ATSA, I can think of very few people more qualified to have a conversation about where we've been and, more importantly, where we're going on this topic than Gail. She's on a very tight timeline today, so she's going to give about 20 minutes of remarks, and then I'm going to go ahead and moderate some questions and answers, and they're questions and answers, not statements and answers. But I'm going to go ahead and go light on Gail's bio, because I think most of us, again, know that she was the acting administrator for a period of time, as we were before John Pistol took over, and of course now she's the deputy administrator, and it continues to have a very important and prominent role inside the future of aviation security. So without further ado, Gail, please.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Ozzie, for the introduction, and appreciate the opportunity, really, to have TSA and not only myself but several members of our senior leadership team here today to have this dialogue. So this week, TSA does turn 10 years old as an organization, and it is 10 years since the creation of the agency as a result of the passage of the Aviation and Transportation Security Act. So what I'm going to do is talk about the first 10 years, and then talk about where we are today and where some of the things that we see evolving over the next 10 years. I'll start by talking about September 11th. And back on September 11th of this year, we were very honored to be asked by the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of American History to partner with them in commemorating the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And actually, the Congress decreed the Smithsonian as the National Archive of the September 11 events, and they have for 10 years been gathering artifacts and historical replicas of that day, and they asked TSA to become a permanent part of that archive because they saw TSA as America's response in the aftermath of September 11th. So we were very fortunate and really honored to donate artifacts to them that really were commemoratives of the stand-up of the agency. So after September 11th, the response from our American citizens to the attacks on 9/11 was phenomenal. And I often tell the story of TSA by talking about some of the data points in that first year. In the first year, to hire federal air marshals, we had more than 20,000 applications for those positions. In the first year, we had a requirement to hire 80 federal security directors. These would be the top TSA officials at the airports. We had over 100,000 applications from the American people for those jobs. And to hire the first federal screeners at the checkpoints and in checked baggage, we had more than 1 million applications in that first year. These individuals answered the call in the aftermath of September 11th, and the ideals that we began this organization with of not on my watch and never again still hold today into the ideals of the employees that work there. I am encouraged by the progress we continue to make with respect to meeting the many challenges of securing all modes of transportation and truly effectively countering the evolving threats we continue to face. I will tell you, and I can't say it strongly enough, make no mistake, transportation, and specifically aviation, is still a prime target of terrorists. To understand where we are now, it helps us to briefly look back and recall what transportation security, and particularly aviation security, looked like prior to 9/11 and prior to those attacks. First of all, there was no system in place for alerting anybody at a national level of information and what was happening at every checkpoint in the United States. Today, we have that capability. There was no ability to share intelligence from the federal level down to individual checkpoints or from those checkpoints back up. There was no systemic approach to assessing risk to the various modes of transportation. There were no systemic capabilities of assessing vulnerabilities across the system. And moreover, the security checkpoint represented a single point of failure. As we know, the 9/11 hijackers exploited those vulnerabilities. There was no cohesive system in place to check passenger names against terrorist watch lists prior to them getting on board an aircraft. Today there is. Only limited technologies were in place for uncovering a wide array of threats to passengers and the aircraft. Basically, handheld metal detectors and walk-through metal detectors were the primary technology in use. And there were no comprehensive federal security requirements to screen checked baggage being loaded in the belly of passenger aircraft. In reality, only about 5% of checked baggage prior to 9/11 was actually screened for explosives. There was minimal in-flight security on most flights, and I don't know that people know that before 9/11, the FAA employed a total of 33 federal air marshals. Passenger security screening at airports was the airline's responsibility, and many of those screeners lasted less than 3 months on the job and had the industry noted that they had about a 400% attrition rate of the screener workforce. And then on 9/11, as all of us in this room and everybody in the airline industry knew, things changed and we knew that air travel would never be the same. In the weeks following the September 11 attacks, the United States Congress moved very quickly, created the Aviation and Transportation Security Act, and created the Transportation Security Administration. From the startup to in December 31st, 2001, there were 6 federal executives and a handful of private sector executives in one room, and we had the challenge of creating the agency and federalizing what everybody knew as security in the aviation domain. 1 year later, on December 31st, 2002, we had more than 60,000 employees at more than 429 airports. We had assessed more than 2 million applications to fill the positions the TSA would employ, and we had met every one of 33 congressional mandates that were set forth in ATSA. And the scope of the transportation system in this country is enormous. There are today 450 commercial airports. There are 361 major seaports. There are 3.9 million miles of public roads. There are 120,000 miles of major railroads, 25,000 miles of commercial navigable waterways, and 2.2 million miles of pipelines. So TSA's job, along with the Department of Homeland Security and our other partners in Department of Transportation, is an enormous responsibility in protecting and securing all of these transportation modes. The stand-up of TSA was not just a federal response. The work of the private sector, and at one point, to reach the December 31st requirements, we had as many people from the private sector working side by side with us as we had federal employees. It represented the largest mobilization of the federal government since World War II, and the challenge was immense. Now, I will tell you, having been there from the beginning, in the beginning, we had several objectives. One was to meet the mandates of ATSA, to meet those 33 mandates. We had requirements to federalize what we knew as every checkpoint and to ensure that 100% of all checked bags were screened for explosives. We also had built a brand new federal agency. And those of you who have worked for the federal government before, or those of you that work for large private sector corporations, those are challenges in and of itself to create an organization from scratch. And did we make mistakes? Absolutely we did. But the important thing is, from day one, we have continuously learned from those mistakes. In fact, I would say that one of the true strengths of TSA is that we continuously learn. We are always asking the questions from the intelligence community that will inform the work that we do. We learn from our experience. We learn from our stakeholders. We learn from our employees, and we learn from the traveling public. And frankly, America should expect no less from us, and we should demand no less from ourselves. So TSA had achieved a number of significant milestones over the past decade, including many of the recommendations that were in the 9/11 Commission report. First of all, we now match 100% of all passengers flying into, out of, and within the United States against the watch lists, and this is known as secure flight. This is an enormously significant achievement for aviation security. It is also the foundation of a lot of our risk-based approach going forward. Second, we've improved aviation security through technology that provides advanced screening for explosives. As of today, nearly 100 airports have inline explosives detection units screening the checked baggage, highly efficient and highly effective systems. In total, nearly 2,000 explosive detection systems are currently in service at 265 airports around the country. And unlike before 9/11, 100% of all checked bag is screened for explosives. As some of you have probably experienced, and probably all of you have read, we do use advanced imaging technology, and we have those at hundreds of passenger checkpoints around the United States today. In fact, we just last week hit the 100th airport where we have installed AIT machines. We also use other technologies, including explosives trace detection and bottle liquid scanners, and we are looking for both metallic and non-metallic threats that are usually in the form of improvised explosives devices. Importantly, with our use of advanced imaging technology, we are very pleased to see the advancements by the industry, particularly the millimeter wave technology and its capability of using automated target recognition. This is a great capability, and it eliminates the privacy concerns that passengers have. We also know that this technology is extraordinarily efficient for us as well as we process people through the checkpoints. Third, TSA now screens all air cargo transported on passenger planes domestically. And as you know, we are working with our international partners to ensure that we screen 100% of high-risk inbound cargo on planes coming into the United States. Of course, it was just this time last year that we saw the issue of cargo-related security to be so fundamentally important, as we saw the foiled air cargo bomb plot from Yemen. That was as a result of intelligence being provided to the Department of Homeland Security and our law enforcement partners. Ordinary items, such as printer cartridges, can be used to conceal improvised explosives devices. The cleverness, the sophistication of those intended to do harm cannot be underestimated. Today, we also deploy explosives detection canine teams, behavior detection officers, and explosives trace detection tools to stay ahead of the evolving threats. Over time, in these 10 years, we have learned to shift from not just looking for prohibited items, but to understand, to gain more knowledge about the people that are coming through these checkpoints. We continue to work closely with the public and private partners inside the airports to assist us with gate and perimeter security practices. Strengthening security for passengers on planes doesn't begin with the checkpoint. It begins long before the passenger shows up at the airport, and it includes measures that are available and in use today on every passenger aircraft. We have hardened cockpit doors. We have thousands and thousands of federal flight deck officers and thousands of federal air marshals, as well as members of the crews who are trained in self-defense. And intelligence, our ability to use real-time intelligence, plays the most critical role in keeping the transportation sector safe. TSA works closely with our partners in the intelligence and law enforcement communities to detect, deter, and disrupt terrorist plots before they ever get to the airport. Let me tell you about a typical day in TSA. It starts early in the morning with members of our intelligence office taking a brief with all members of the intelligence community. At 8:30 every morning, the administrator, myself, and every member of the senior leadership team sits in the skiff and gets the latest intelligence from the community. We also look at every incident that has occurred in the last 24 hours in every mode of transportation that represented a potential security issue. We have the capability now from every airport in this nation to know and monitor what is happening at those checkpoints, what is happening on board the aircraft, and the capability to analyze those issues and understand them and understand what has occurred in order to strengthen the system is enormously important. In addition, our ability to take that intelligence in the morning and operationalize it throughout that day is one of the strengths, invisible to the public, but it is one of the strengths of the Transportation Security Administration today. We also have a very strong relationship with our partners in industry to share that security information. And I believe that in the long run, one of the greatest benefits that TSA will provide in the entire Homeland Security portfolio is how we have learned to adapt and be flexible to receive that intelligence in the morning and turn it into actual operational protocols, many of which are invisible to the traveling public, but we know they increase the security, whether it's in one airport, whether it's in one mode of transportation. Clearly, aviation security is stronger and more rigorous now than it was a decade ago, and TSA is continuing to enhance the security with our evolutionary program or approach called risk-based intelligence-driven security. So I want to talk about that for a little bit. In the beginning, our goal was to provide federal screeners in every checkpoint, and the principle or the expectation was if you get screened at Logan Airport, you should have the same screening experience at LAX. And what we have learned over time is that that actually creates a vulnerability in the system. If you have very predictable screening methods, then the terrorists will know exactly what to study and how to engineer their attack around those systems. Clearly, one of the things that we've applied is more than 20 layers of security. We have 275 last points of departure, that is foreign airports, 275 that have flights coming into the U.S. every day. We have approximately 200,000 flights that come into the U.S. every day from these last points of departure. So it is extraordinarily important that we look at what we do here in the U.S. and we support and enable our foreign partners to raise their levels of security as well. We have closed security gaps, we have built a strong network, and we have enhanced security across the board. I don't believe that it is a coincidence that the attacks that were foiled since 9/11, specifically the UK plot in 2006, the Christmas Day attack in 2009, and the air cargo plot in 2010, the fact that they originated outside of the United States and involved very unique explosives, these were created to evade the security protocols that have been put in place. We have hardened our system, and we use the intelligence we have to proactively, continuously improve that security. So what do the next 10 years offer for aviation security? When Administrator and I talk about risk-based, intelligence-driven security, it's important to note that this is not just a temporary program. It is not a limited initiative being evaluated just for application in one or two places. We are testing this initiative in several airports around the country, but our vision is to have this be a system-wide approach to providing security in the aviation domain. It is comprehensive. We have taken a look at many of our security processes and initiatives to see how we can carry them out more effectively and more efficiently. It means focusing our human resources on those we know the least about and using intelligence, often what is classified, in better ways to inform the actual physical screening process. One aspect of our risk-based, intelligence-driven security approach is called Tsa Precheck. Have any of you experienced this yet in any of your travels? Not yet. Okay. Well, let me tell you what you're in store for. Through this initiative, we are able to actually do pre-screening of passengers based upon information that they have shared with us or with the airlines. By doing so, it allows us to actually create a separate line for these individual passengers and to actually provide them with a different form of security screening. The efficiencies that will be gained by implementing a more risk-based security approach will enable us to make the best possible use of our personnel. The objective being, let us spend more time on those we know less about and less time on those that we know more about. So right now, we have a pilot going with Delta Airlines, American Airlines, and we have partnered with CBP's Trusted Traveler program, including Global Entry, Sentry, and Nexus. And those who are U.S. citizens who fly domestically on Delta or American are eligible for this screening option. Should they opt into the program, it qualifies them for expedited checkpoint screening. And right now we're piloting this in Atlanta, in Detroit, at Dallas-Fort Worth, and in Miami. And it has had tremendous positive receptivity by the traveling public, and it has given us invaluable information. Right after the first of the year, we plan on expanding the pilot to airports in Minneapolis, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles. Those selected, so the passengers who are selected for expedited screening are directed to a dedicated lane, and for many business travelers especially, they're allowed to keep their shoes on, keep their laptops and their 311 liquids bag in their carry-on bags, also keep their belts and any light jackets on as they proceed through the checkpoint. Throughout this process and throughout these pilot stages, we will review the data. We will inform our decision-making processes based upon the experience we have with these pilots and continue to consider expanding the program to include additional travelers, additional airports, and additional airlines. Now, the one thing, as I said, when you create a system, you have to make sure that you create something that the terrorists and those intent to do harm can't game. And so at any time, these travelers have been told that they may, in fact, be directed to the regular screening lines. So that in order to remain effective, we must always continue to employ some degree of random and unpredictable security measures. So there are a number of other elements of this program that the administrator has implemented over the last year. Those of you that know John Pistol knows that he had a 27-year career with the FBI. So he came into TSA with a different view on what risk management means and how do you look at terrorism and terrorist threats. And he actually one day talked about his experiences at the FBI in the investigation of an airline crash where it was determined that the co-pilot actually put the plane down. And he said, so what experience and what training experience do pilots go through? What kind of training do they have? What kind of background checks do they have? And when they show up at the airport, what kind of screening do they undergo? And we said they go through traditional screening like everybody else. To which he said, well, from a risk-based standpoint, what do we care if they're carrying a knife? What do we care if they have any other prohibited item? They actually have the controls of the aircraft in their hand, and if they're intent to take down the aircraft, they can very easily do it. And in working with the airlines, we realized that there are techniques available for us to verify the true identity of somebody who presents themselves at a checkpoint in a pilot's uniform. And so working with the airlines, we have piloted in 12 different airports a program where we're verifying their actual identity and their employment with the air carrier. And then they are going through the checkpoint without going through the traditional screening that all other passengers face. In addition, as part of our risk-based, intel-driven approach, we have made some other changes to some of the screening processes, including how we screen children 12 and under. And based on an assessment and based upon the intelligence, it indicates that children 12 and under are a much lower risk and a much less threat to the aircraft. So we will continue to develop these techniques. We will continue to look at ways that we can screen people differently based upon the intelligence information we get. We continue to look at best practices from around the world. We have deployed our behavior detection officers, and including piloting in Boston and in Detroit, an expanded version of our BDO program. And we are finding both a very positive reception from the traveling public as well as an added security value. In any environment, an essential component of effective partnerships is information sharing and outreach. TSA works very hard to work with our stakeholders, not just the traveling public, but special interest groups, special groups that manage handicapped people, persons with disabilities, persons with special, physical ailments. All of these people represent a stakeholder to us, as well as our global partners. All of this information, being able to share information that we have, share the intelligence we have, and share the security protocols, ends up ultimately strengthening the whole system. As we begin another Thanksgiving travel season, which tends to be our busiest travel time of the whole year, we will have probably next Wednesday about 2.2 million travelers going through our checkpoints. The following Sunday, we'll have another 2.2 million, and that is an increase over the 1.8 million that we screen every single day around the year. It is extremely important to us that we keep wait times to a minimum. We have a track record of 98% or greater of our wait times are less than 20 minutes across the system. We work very hard to ensure that we will maintain that. We put out a lot of information on our blog to travelers during the holiday seasons, particularly during the Christmas holidays, with passengers wrapping gifts and things like that. Believe me, despite what some people would like to say, we don't get a kick out of opening people's Christmas presents, and we actually really do want to make the screening process as easy as possible on people. So the more that we can inform people, the better it is for our officers, and actually the more secure it is for the traveling public. In conclusion, I will say without question, security in the aviation domain is stronger today than it was 10 years ago. We have 20 layers of security in place today. These layers have been scrutinized by the Congress, by GAO, by the Inspector General, and have been looked at and reviewed by security experts around the globe. The foundation to everything we do is our people, our processes, and our technologies, and they continue to improve over time. Our goal is straightforward and direct to provide the most effective security in the most efficient way to keep our citizens safe when they travel. Now, I frequently say that TSA is all about the people, Today, our frontline officers do not have an average of 3 months on the job. 50% of our officers have been on the job 5 years. That is an incredible amount of tenure in this business, and it's an incredible capability to build upon to increase the security effectiveness. 25% of our officers are veterans who continue to serve their country as a part of TSA. These highly experienced professionals have screened more than 5 billion people in the last 10 years and more than 4 billion checked bags. Today, TSA conducts background checks and perpetually vets 15 million transportation-related employees working in the transportation sector through our vetting capabilities. And as I said, there are more than 275 last points of departures with 2,000 flights coming into the U.S. every day. TSA routinely inspects those 275 last points of departure. There are approximately 7 million pounds of air cargo that are lifted off of aircraft every day in the U.S., and TSA inspects those systems as well. Around the globe, TSA's experience is sought after. They will have TSA try the newest technology and see what our experience is with that technology before they will deploy it in their airports. TSA is routinely asked to come train in foreign airports. We are routinely requested to provide the training and hiring standards of our officers, and it is a remarkable experience to go through something like the 2006 UK liquids plot and see that within a matter of weeks of TSA establishing the 311 rule, there were 29 other countries around the globe that implemented the exact same requirements. To be successful in our risk-based approach, we need the support of our partners and clearly of the traveling public. We believe that security is a shared responsibility with everyone playing a part. 10 years from a blank sheet of paper and a congressional law to an organization with a risk-based counterterrorism mission and a workforce dedicated to carrying out that mission, screening roughly 50 million people a month. That was America's response to 9/11, and today those of us in TSA start every shift and every day with the same passion and commitment to the public we serve, which is not on our watch. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, I think we have time for just one question. Unfortunately, Gail has to go to another event. So who wants to be the lucky person? Anyone? All right, right here in the back, blue suit. There's a microphone. If you could state your name and your affiliation and just a real quick question.
My name's Martin Apple. Affiliation is the Council of Scientific Society Presidents. You're facing a sort of set of odds in which the bad guys can target anything they want, and you have to figure out where it is, and you have to have a much larger force to be able to do that. You go up a learning curve at a pretty fast rate based on what you've just said, and so do they at another rate. If you match those two curves, which one is going faster?
Actually, I would say TSA's is, and the reason I say that is that we have, every day we have 50,000 people working in this domain in airports that are looking at the traveling public and the people coming through. We have an enormous capability here in the United States with the technology industry that are working very, very hard to continue to identify the greatest technologies for detection purposes. And we have an enormous capability that the bad guys and the public doesn't see, which is in the intelligence capability that the country has today that we didn't have 10 years ago. So I know that we're safer. I believe that we are stronger. I believe that we have capability, and I believe that with the partnership with the private sector and law enforcement, that somebody is going to see something, somebody's going to say something, somebody's going to note that there's an anomaly, and we will continue to recognize people that are intent to do harm. So, you know, it is a tough, tough situation. And as somebody even recently said to Mr. Pistol in a hearing, we have to be right 100% of the time. They only have to get it right once.
Well, great. Well, again, we're honored to have Gail here to speak. We're going to let her depart, and then we're going to reconvene in about 7 minutes. So a round of applause, please.